did you go to school?
What do you think of what's going on right now, mate?
These evil little invisible parasites.
Satan-worshipping Freemason moron.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
We're not run by factions.
Get the fuck out of camera!
There are much more powerful international forces in play.
Is this pink eye? Is this what pink eye is? I don't fucking know what's happening.
Please go outside and look at the moon quickly.
It's been crazy, guys, but guess what? It's how it is, mate.
Mate, because I want to do you slowly.
Well, I ain't spending any time on it.
Welcome to the Conditional Release Program and podcast that delves into the netherworld of cults, crims and con artists. I'm Jack the Insider, otherwise known as Peter Hoisted for tax purposes.
And I'm Joel Hill, and this week we are going to start on a brighter note and look at the bizarre misadventures of the Julian Assange wannabe Simeon Boikov, who has taken refuge in the Russian consulate to avoid going back to prison for assault causing actual bodily harm.
Where's the Russian consulate? It's in Double Bay, isn't it? So
Yes,
really
it's a nice part of the world.
upscaled that
Yeah.
address, yeah.
Fancy.
It's got to be an incredibly unpleasant experience for the Russian consulate staff, who are now sharing a toilet with the Ataman himself.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what that bloke does to a bit of porcelain? I shudder to think, but that's the price of freedom. Well, his freedom. He's always going to fuck up his parole. It was a matter of time, and he was always going to be a real prick about it.
That's what he's like. That's what he's like. So we'll continue to look at that, and we'll continue to look at our probe into that Wieambilla shooting, which has unfolded dramatically since last episode. So much has come to light. Bloody excellent work from journalists across the board, and some of our listeners who have done amazing work as well, which journalists have,
True.
have amplified. And they've uncovered this complex story behind the train trio. And I'll cover some of the sort of boneheaded conspiracy theories that have followed from all the usual suspects. And they're basically just coming up with excuses to avoid any kind of responsibility for what happened.
And speaking of responsibility, which I can't pronounce right now, I'm responsible for shaking the coin cup at you, dear listeners, to help keep this thing of ours, La Cosa Nostra, going. We have a Patreon, and not only do you get a warm feeling from helping us keep this thing going, but
Very
you
warm.
also get a shitload of bonus content as well.
Yes, you do. There's bloody hours of the stuff. We've done heaps.
Hours.
And some of it's actually not bad. I mean, like, it's kind of worth it. I'd like it if I wasn't me. So give us some money. It really does help. It means we can put more time into the show. And for as little as $5 a month, you can have access to all the good shit behind the paywall, which we actually have kind of worked on. But you'll also get our undying love. And while
Absolutely.
that it does seem cheap,
Unrequited to be fair, but undying.
but it's good love. It's good love. $5 worth of love actually ain't bad. I'm telling you right. You'll get value.
Yeah, used to get you a lot further in the old days. But anyway, so crack out your credit card and join up at patreon.com/the Conditional Release Program. But enough of that. It's time for the Conditional Release Program's weekly news. 'Tis the season and all that.
It is. And we just have to start with Simeon Boikov and his utterly pathetic attempt to weasel out of the consequences of his actions.
Imagine that.
Oh, it's just so out of character for him. So many of you know that Boikov is out on parole after serving 4 months of a 10-month sentence. He got it down from 6 on appeal, blah, blah, blah. But while his parole period was about to expire, so close, he just couldn't help himself and he got in trouble again, which is not surprising whatsoever.
Quel surprise.
This time he went to a pro-Ukraine rally to harass the people demonstrating, as he is wont to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all very textbook Boikov, but he alleges that he was actually going to buy a nice warm coat for his upcoming trip to Russia. Don't know why he planned a trip when he was on parole, and was surprised to see a pro-Ukraine rally and spontaneously decided to just go and have a look and make some content.
He'd actually already requested to be given permission to go to Russia, and had been knocked back, Joel.
Yes, and it's just one of those things where it's like, mate, you're not going. Stop buying warm things. It's summer.
Yeah.
That being said, the cold snap in Sydney, he actually made the right choice. I hate him for that. Well done, Boikov. Well done.
Good. Excellent lifestyle choice.
The first good decision you've made in a long time. Your nice, warm Russian jacket. So in the process of filming people and hassling them, he was approached by a 76-year-old, 76 years young, man who he then pushed violently downstairs. He required hospitalization. He was okay, but, I mean, it wasn't good.
A bit shaken up, yeah. Could have been very, 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 very nasty. As I say, 76-year-old man, tend not to fall well.
At that age, you don't fall, you have a fall. And when that happens, bad things happen. But of course, the Cossack is coming out claiming this was in self-defense because, the big scary old man. But it's probably going to be difficult to claim that it was reasonable proportionate to push an old man down the stairs. But the Cossack's lawyer, Mark Davis, is going to do his best to spin this and get him off the charge.
Yeah, good lawyer is.
He's a
Mr.
good lawyer.
Davis,
Why are
excellent
you hanging
criminal
on
lawyer.
Boikov?
Look,
Don't
I
do
did watch the tape, and I saw a touch of the hand. A 76-year-old man reached out and touched Boikov's hand. So first contact was made by the elderly gent, but the response was no way near reasonable to propose a successful self-defense.
Yeah, just don't.
So that's the problem. A hand on yours is not quite the same thing as pushing someone down, a couple of steps.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very difficult sell, but they'll try.
They'll try.
Because they are going to court on this, because Boikov was arrested and taken to Day Street Police Station in Sydney.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, maybe.
Where he was processed and charged with assault occasioning actual bodily harm and granted conditional bail to appear at Downing Centre Local Court on January 25th. Now, after being released, a little conversation was had behind the scenes and Boikov's parole was revoked and he was ordered to surrender himself to police, which he did not. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and Mrs. Cossack, well, I assume Mrs. Cossack, was posting on Telegram that early morning raids were conducted targeting relatives of Boikov, knock, knock, knock.
Well, that's what police do when you breach bail conditions.
There's a warrant out for your arrest, you fucking idiot. So Boikov did the most reasonable thing and sought political asylum at the Russian consulate in Sydney, claiming that he has no faith in the legal system, no faith in the police, and no faith in the courts to be fair in the process. Because apparently getting charged for assaulting an old man is tyranny now.
It's a
tyranny.
new form of tyranny.
Oh
yes.
my God, the oppression. I can't handle the police arresting people for assaulting old men.
Why can't I be allowed to push the elderly around, Joel?
I know, totally. First they came for the old man bashers and I did nothing.
It's communism. It's
Just
communism.
Fucking embarrassing. So Mark Davis, his lawyer, legitimised the stunt with a statement saying to News Corp, I can confirm that Mr. Boikov is currently at the Russian consulate in Sydney, that he is seeking consular assistance and is considering seeking refuge at the consulate and then exploring his options thereafter.
Well, there you go. So he's doing a Julian Assange. Albeit, Julian, of course, famously entered the Ecuadorian embassy in London, of course, and took up residence in a room. And he was often called, perhaps unkindly, cupboard boy because he lived there for a very long time. But the truth is he lived in a women's toilet,
Jesus.
which was with an ante-room that was basically changed in order to meet his needs. The toilet
Fucking
and so forth
brutal.
remained there. But the sort of ante-room around the toilet area.
I'm not a
became
huge
his
fan of
apartment.
Assange, but
And he lived there
that's
for
insane.
6.5 years. All I want to say, Joel, is would you be happy if Simeon lived in your shithouse
No.
for 6.5 years?
no, I wouldn't. And for very good reasons. And for reasons related to the shithouse.
would be very
telling you
smelly.
that porcelain's going to get fucking beaten.
Simeon, tidy yourself up. Here's a wet one. Please,
Fucking
man.
awful. Boikov has cemented himself as a true pest who will do anything for attention. This really is absolutely textbook for him. His plight has reached Russian media, as usual, where he has laid his persecution complex on incredibly thick, with reports that he's seeking Russian citizenship, claiming he is a victim of persecution as he is a true patriot who is always on the side of Russia in an unfriendly country.
He's Russian Jesus.
I just honestly, just go to Russia and fuck off and don't come back. You think we'll miss you? No. But of course, this echoes previous sentiments by Boikov, and that was actually said by an official over in Russia. He claimed he was working hard on Russian interest in an enemy state. And of course, the enemy state's Australia. That's us.
Yeah, that's
and
us.
you got these fucking bootlickers in the western suburbs you think is the coolest guy ever. Dude, he's working against your interests. Wake the fuck up, you morons. Anyway, Simeon Boikov's a massive cunt. This is just a massive stunt for him to get more attention and, likes from morons. And of course, the reason he's seeking political asylum is not because he has to. It's because it gets him attention. And the Russians are playing ball because they love this circus.
Yeah, well, look, he seems to have misunderstood the nature of political asylum, Joel.
Oh, surprising.
I mean, look, you can do it at a consular office or embassy building, but generally speaking, you need to be in the other country before you say, I call political asylum. You can do it in consular offices, of course. But the other side of that argument is, as you say, he will have to go and live in Russia.
Good.
And when he gets to Russia, he's going to get shanghaied in Putin's army and off to the Donbass, where Simeon will become the biggest, pinkest HIMARS target the world has ever seen. You got to get there before you ask for political silence, Simeon. You know, you seem to be missing that. Ooh,
Imagine it being
Mars.
so
Late.
I want to have dinner with Edward Snowden. They're like, no, you're not having dinner with Edward Snowden.
Oh, and tonight.
No. You're going to be a target for firearms in Ukraine. Good luck to you.
HIMARS.
Yeah.
Enter. Exit light. Enter night.
It's like in Vietnam when you can pay to shoot a bazooka into a cow, and that will be Boikov. Someone will just pay money, and they'll be like, "Don't worry, comrade. The money is going to the war effort." Thank you, Simeon. Thank you for your sacrifice. You
Pull his
fucking
trousers
moron.
down so you can just point it straight at his ass.
Oh my god! I'm picturing his ass, and I fucking hate you for doing that to me.
Here's a wet one. Use a wet one, Simeon, please. Here's the wet ones. Use the wet ones.
It'd have no shape. It'd just be this drape of skin. Anyway,
enough of that.
Not going to share that. It is absolutely stunning that his supporters take him seriously and don't see him as a fucking clown and a circus he's making. But that's because his supporters are incredibly stupid. This is the amazing thing about targeting anti-vaxxers and these kind of fringe dwellers is because most of them are fucking morons. That's why they're anti-vaxxers in the first place. But with any luck, eventually they'll wake up to this absolute fucking charade and it will end very badly for him because without his supporters, he has nothing. But Teflon Boikov will likely end up with yet another slap on the wrist from the judiciary, which he's so scared of, not at all. And let's face it, if he did this in Russia, he would be a bucket of Novichok right now. Of course, instead, he's just a bucket of shit waiting for a HIMARS to hit him in the arse. But
what I'd like to see happen here is when he does finally get to the courts, if that does happen, I mean, he may actually be serious about his political asylum, which is
do it.
Really bad move, as we've discussed.
Do it.
But if he did do that, I mean, the sorts of things that should be imposed on him if he is found guilty, he is yet to be found guilty, but if he is, an intensive corrections order would be exactly what he would hate.
Yep.
And,
do not cause trouble or we will jail you.
Yeah. And you've got to attend certain premises, certain times, all this sort of stuff.
Look how parole worked out for him. It didn't take him long to fuck it up. And now he's like facing jail time and he's run off to fucking Assange in a consulate. What a cunt. Oh, dear. All right, let's get sad.
Yeah, look, it is an unhappy news item here. And we're staying with Wieambilla, Queensland. And last week I wrote a column why the ambush at the train property there led to the deaths of 2 police officers and a 58-year-old neighbour of the trains, and why it was not being called an act of domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of sarcasm on my part. There are lots of reasons police and politicians don't want to refer to it as such. It's that sort of blood on the wattle argument, and politicians are especially fearful of it. They're sort of willing it away as a one-off, I guess. They broadly understand what they are dealing with, but they don't want to frighten the horses, an ununified Australia and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Last Friday, and we're recording on Tuesday the 20th, but last Friday opposition leader Peter Dutton actually spoke pretty well when he said it is domestic terrorism. There you go.
Yep.
And it's on a huge scale. There are terabytes of data, he said. And he drew the parallel that we've been taking here when Dutton likened the situation 10 years ago when young people started becoming radicalised online to support Islamic State.
Yeah, two sides of the same coin.
But then Dutton crossed the Rubicon and suggested the blame lies with social media companies. Peter, mate, the internet is bigger than a bread box and very hard to control. So when you start sort of doing these attacks on social media companies, and by the way, Joel, is the train clip still up on Rumble?
I believe so. I believe it's actually been sort of replicated by clout chasers who are trying to keep it up there. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to this idea of silencing the internet, yes, okay, Google might respond. Facebook, I believe, take up to 2 years to respond to police requests. Mm-hmm. Getting subpoenas across jurisdictional lines is a legal fucking nightmare. Yeah. Basically what you do is you send a form to this company from, good letterheads, and you hope they respond. But generally speaking, they've probably got an automatic filter on their inbox that says, deal with later, because there's no real international force that's going to come down on their heads. So,
and those sort of, wayward sites like Telegram and Rumble, they're just going to ignore you.
Oh, totally. And the thing is, it costs money to respond to these things. So even if they had a social responsibility, even if they felt compelled to do this, they'd have to hire staff. Yeah, exactly. They don't. They'd have to hire staff to do it. So in the end, unless there is some kind of world government body that regulates this kind of thing, then it's not going to happen. The only thing they can do is they can basically live in fear of being banned from the App Store and Google Play Store. But that's a whole nother conversation. Either way, that's it. Like, as you say, is it still up on Rumble? Not only that, but it's been replicated. because other people get
and
clicks.
and that's really ugly. For those who haven't seen it, brief description, there was the three of them, the three trains on the property. It was after they had ambushed the police. It was presumably after the neighbour had also been murdered.
Yeah, probably.
And they were talking about how they'd removed demons and devils from their property,
Yeah. And there's a bunch of other videos as well. And look, I would say they're not worth watching. They're not. No. They're not really interesting, and it is pretty shit. But look, you can find it pretty easily if you really want to.
Yeah, that's the thing. It'll stay up online. Look, politicians should be guarded about their messaging on this, but not shrinking away from calling out the violent behaviour.
Yeah.
And the first thing to say is this is not a situation that should be framed by ideology or by the old left-right constructs.
Yeah, fair.
And back in September 2021, there was a police siege on a property in Sandy Creek, 65 kilometres north of Adelaide, which we covered on the conditional release program.
Yes, we did.
We won't go into it too far because it remains before the courts. I believe the protagonist there has gone before the courts just last month, but it's
still pretty fresh.
Still no outcome.
We'll keep you posted on it, though.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep you posted.
We're choosing not to name her, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Just given the nature of proceedings that are taking place against her.
Yeah, sweet.
But when that raid occurred, South Australian Police described the communal living on the property as, and I quote, a sovereign citizen freedom farm. Now, by any measure, this was a group who, if you really felt the need, you would describe as Green Left.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, according to his online engagements, Gareth Train identified as a Christian conservative. And I say for what it's worth because clearly he wasn't a conservative. You don't get to call yourself a conservative after ambushing and murdering 3 people.
No.
Christian, well, yes, and we'll get to that shortly. But left or right doesn't really matter. And if you're looking for a sign of ideology in the SA group or the trains in Wieambilla, you're missing the point. And both were very dangerous situations. The former attended by a large group of police who ultimately made arrests after a standoff.
Yeah, true.
And the latter, of course, was a highly planned execution of police and whoever else got in the way.
Fucking neighbour, yeah. Terrible.
The major issue around this, whether we call people soft-sits, preppers or late for dinner, what is obvious is religious fundamentalism and extreme distrust of government and all its branches, law enforcement, health admin, etc., is the most dangerous nexus of all.
Totally. And we see this in the My Place parallel councils, which is covered in Tinfoil Tales. We see it in the parallel fake unions under this sort of red union umbrella. There's a parallel health organisation that's apparently coming out of the woodwork, and Monica Smith wanted to set one up for some weird reason. We've got a union run by people who hate unions because there's this weird backlash to this existence of these enforced rules during mandates and lockdowns. But at the end of the day, look, these are parallel organisations run under very strange ideological lines that are not in the interest of their members or anyone around it. After a while, it stops being funny and it starts being concerning.
Trying to discern left or right it's actually sort of pointless exercise and a waste of time.
Yeah.
When we look at that sort of issue of religious fundamentalism, and then when we think of Indigenous members of this amorphous movement, this sort of sovereign citizen movement, for want of a better term, the same can be said for them. You just replace animism and culture for fundamentalist religion. And with the same sort of fundamentalist zeal. It's the same thing. The same psychology is at work here.
Totally. There's power, there's clout chasing. Like we saw Buddy Shillingsworth creating that parallel police force, the law enforcement thing, which he basically just bought a car with appropriated charity funds, slapped a decal on it, but he was applauded by ABC Indigenous in November 2021. I saw another puff piece by a community radio outlet, The Wire, claiming the law enforcement unit was in consultations with elders. This entirely independent service is aiming to restore tribal law to the traditional lands of the Murawari and Bujiti peoples. No, this is a group of pilled idiots who are trying to start a parallel police force to enforce laws they're making up as they go along because it makes them feel good, and it's mostly for clout. These are, as you say, for lack of a better term, I'm sorry, Rob, soft-sits who just want to have some fun. And hopefully after what we've seen here, the media won't treat dangerous stunts like this as these sort of wonderful moments of cultural expression, but actually dangerous developments from a group of pilled idiots looking for power. I mean, this is the thing. These people are almost always bad actors doing bad things.
And as we all know, it involves people sitting in dark corners of the internet, in messaging groups, subreddits, chat rooms, whatever, where relatively small groups of people ideate violence over and over in these echo chambers until it becomes normalised and terrorist outrages become possible.
Yeah, or inevitable.
And let's look at terrorism. There are a lot of tortured definitions out there. Tortured because the world can't come to an easy agreement on what constitutes terrorism and what doesn't. And there are reams of paper devoted to it in the United Nations alone. UN member nations still have not agreed to a set definition of terrorism, which tells you pretty much all you need to know about the United Nations. But they have kind of settled on one. It's outstanding. Joel, just read that definition for me, please.
Criminal acts intended or calculated to provoke a state of terror in the general public, a group of persons, or particular persons for political purposes are in any circumstance unjustifiable, whatever the considerations of a political, philosophical, ideological, racial, ethnic, religious, or any other nature that may be invoked to justify them. That was a tongue twister.
There is a tongue twister and a half. Good. A really turgid and unnecessarily complicated definition of what constitutes terrorism.
Yeah.
But even with this torturous definition, what boxes, did the trains not tick in here? True. I mean, we could actually say it's an apolitical group. We would say there's no philosophical basis to it, but there is certainly religious and ideological basis to it. And then the criminal acts are intended or calculated to provoke terror, a state of terror, in a group of persons or particular persons or in the general public. Now, you go and talk to anyone in Wieambilla, or indeed anyone in Western or southwestern Queensland at the moment, and they will be concerned about this. Yeah. They'll be concerned about this, and more broadly, we should be concerned as a nation just how many other people are out there like the trains.
Yeah, plotting quietly. It really is. There's a lot to be said about the conversation after this, about what we do with these sort of people who are in this sort of state of mind. And we'll talk about it further down the track, but it is concerning because, they sort of walk among us, but they also squirrel themselves off. It's going to be very hard to enforce this and to understand it, especially with people who come into it with no understanding and, like normies in the intelligence and police forces who just go, oh, yeah, so what's this all about? I mean, it's a lot to wrap your head around.
These are the things that we need to change. I mean, Peter Dutton was right. It is domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
And forgive me for stating the bleeding obvious, and this is also a reference he made, but if the trains were shouting Inshallah last Monday week,
fuck yeah,
we can be fairly confident a lot of doors would be getting kicked down now.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to have a look at what the banned organisations in Australia are at the moment, banned terrorist organisations are at the moment. And under federal and state law, it is an offence punishable with a 12-year jail term to be a member.
Whoa.
Just a member of a terrorist organisation. That's what makes our laws a little bit different to the US and Canada, for example. So we'll just have a quick scroll through. Most of these groups are Al-Qaeda groups, ISIS groups, and affiliates. Hamas is there, interestingly. Hezbollah is also there, added on the 10th of December last year. There's another group, Huras al-Din, was added in April. And then we've got the various Islamic State affiliates.
Jamaat Islamiyah, Boko Haram's in there.
Yes, you just mentioned them. The interesting one there is the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which
that's
it's a little bit suspect in that certainly the PKK has been involved in terrorist outrages in Turkey, and Turkey places a great deal of pressure on the EU, on the US and other countries like Australia to say, look, these guys are terrorists. Other people might be saying, well, they are freedom fighters, Kurdistan Workers' Party who've been shafted in northern Iraq and what have you. But yes, that's a terrorist and has been listed terrorist organisation since 2005 and was renewed on the 4th of August. Then we got Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is another one people may know of. The National Socialist Order was added in 18th of February, and I know very little about them.
Yeah.
Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And interestingly, the last two on this list, by the dates they were added, is the Sonnenkrieg Division, a neo-Nazi group. They were added on the 11th of August, and then The Base, which is a neo-fascist organisation. And these really are the first of the extreme right-wing groups.
Yeah.
And knowing the little bit about them that I do, Sonnenkrieg Division and The Base don't have strong networks here. And of course, if anyone gets caught, just online conversations with members of this group, they can be presumed to be members, and they can be arrested and then taken off for 21 days without any recourse to a solicitor or anything like that. It gets pretty serious when counter-terrorism laws are kicked in.
Yeah, I imagine Tom Tanuki or Slackbastard would know a bit about what's going on there with the base and Sonic Crane Division, blah, blah, blah. They have their nose on the Nazi stank.
Yeah, they most certainly will. But when these two groups were added to the list of banned terrorist organisations, it was made fairly clear that it was done on the understanding that it was a growing movement overseas that was reaching out to Australia.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if they did it to the Proud Boys. That'd really fuck them up.
Well, they're facing their own sets of problems now, the Proud Boys, with multiple charges for members for the January 6 stuff.
Well, they shouldn't be so naughty.
Yeah, they are very naughty.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a problem.
So when we think about sausage in line of all of this and all these sort of specific bands of terrorist organisations or organisations linked to terrorism, you can see there would be many practical problems with describing the sovereign citizen movement as a terrorist organisation.
Yeah.
And while there has been an explosion of numbers and indeed of online content in Australia, the movement itself remains amorphous with no real political structure. And that's the box it doesn't tick on the definition of terrorism, although that's kind of an esoteric argument. It's not a political group per se. Really, in many ways, it's kind of opportunism,
Yeah.
And the movement's old influences are kind of almost irrelevant now, Wayne Glue, etc., musing over the constitutional legal framework and coming up with all this pseudo-law nonsense that says, the police are all criminals and you can go and do whatever you like to them.
Making his own version of the Constitution that he sells for $100
all that sort of stuff.
Quick and Garren,
That's become almost irrelevant now. Rather, we have a group of people pilled to the eyeballs on anti-vax and 5G stupidity, for example, who are playing a game of telephone on social media. You must have played telephone when you were a kid, Joe.
No.
Well, sometimes we call it Chinese whispers, but that's a bit racist.
It is.
You whisper something in. Purple Monkey dishwasher. And and that's the way it's getting through the freedom movement now.
Yeah.
This is why numbers are really burgeoning around this movement, ideating a sort of anarchy where the laws don't apply to them without that sort of pseudo-legal framework behind them. They just say, mate, you don't have to carry a driver's license, you don't have to have an insured vehicle, you don't have to register your vehicle.
They've got no power over you, it's fine.
It's just a man, look what they've done to you lately. Look what they've done to you.
Yeah.
And so that's
no jurisdiction.
That's the sort of basis now, that it's this kind of messaging that goes across multiple layers of the freedom movement that says the laws don't have any jurisdiction over you.
And I think that's the sort of thing that, Be Free with D Osmond, those sort of guys, they're the ones who are really spearheading that pivot.
Yeah, that's right.
Because while she used to go on the Magna Carta all the time, I don't think she's so much on that bent anymore. I think it's a lot more practical. It's like, here's a form you can send to someone.
Yep.
Here we can conduct forms of paper terrorism.
We don't want to bore you with Wayne Glue's, ministrations on constitutional law, because it's boring. Right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest with it. It's boring. And Glue and others are influencers, so let's not diminish their influence over this particular movement. Yeah, but as it's basically morphed and evolved through the pandemic, this is the way it is now.
Yeah.
That's why the numbers are burgeoning. It's really, there are only so few people, cookers included, who can sit down and read what Wayne Glue has to say.
Yes, or listen to that snapping turtle speak through his weird face. Doesn't really speak. And you can't really understand.
That's the worst Wayne Glue. That's the worst Wayne Glue I've ever heard.
Try.
No, I'm not going to do that.
No,
I need to prepare. Anyway, this is almost a cult of convenience because it ethically permits violent ideation.
Yes.
Hang Dan Andrews, hang Greg Hunt, hang police.
Yeah.
And if you keep saying these things over and over, pretty soon it legitimises a terrorist act.
Yeah.
And with plenty of urging from the others in the echo chamber, be they here or overseas.
Yeah, exactly. And it just, they one up each other to the point where, you know, someone stands on a fucking car and has a bow outside a bloody Parliament House.
Yeah, exactly right. Now, I've been asking Sandy and Sos from Tinfoil Tales what was going to happen to the freedom movement since its halcyon days when it had, maybe 30 or 40,000 people in Canberra. I think that's fairly right.
Something like that was big.
Yeah, certainly big. And that was only this February, by the way.
Yeah.
It seems like a long time ago, doesn't it, Joel?
Oh, yes. It feels like a very long time ago. The epic days where they were radiated for their trouble.
So that was always, I was kind of fascinated with this. And Sandy and Sos, well, they know the cookie universe better than anybody. And so I was always fascinated to ask them, what's going to happen? How is this going to evolve? And it turns out the answer is pretty much what we had thought. Lots of people will go home, carry a certain frustration with governments and the man in general. And most of them have. They've just gone home, they've resumed their lives, and they have new jobs and all this sort of stuff, and they're disgruntled. They're a little bit cross, but they've gone on with their lives. And that's the bulk of that movement has basically resumed life. Still angry, still a little bit bitter, but have gone on to resume their lives and still probably play in the universe as well a little bit, and chat and ideate and all that sort of stuff. But then there's a rusted on section. It's hard to know the percentages. Maybe 10%. I don't know. But these people can't go back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And not just because they're pilled, influenced by grifters and clout chasers, although they certainly are.
Yes.
But because they are lost and they are refusing to return.
Yeah.
They have withdrawn from the cities. They sit on the fringes of society, geographically, culturally, politically, and they are raring to go.
They've got nothing but spare time.
And as Rob Sudi says, for anyone, police or not, who enters their premises, these people, rusted ons, violence is inevitable.
Yeah. For some people, I think they're really geared up toward that. And that's what happened with this train situation. But look, we joke about this whole van down by the river thing. And it's if you don't know the joke, it's an old Saturday Night Live sketch with Chris Farley. He's a motivational speaker and, he lives in a van down by the river and it's this whole thing. But it really has, it's worth looking at. It's great. We both know, it's funny. But
we couldn't get the T-shirts. They don't ship to Australia. There were Chris Farley. It was his character. Matt Foley. Even in a van down by the river. God, we wanted them, but we couldn't get them.
He scares the shit out of children. Yeah, it's really good. So basically, this thing has come true, and it speaks this idea of these people ending up on the fringe. Guru sold everything and lives on a boat, and now he just spends his time trying to pill people on Facebook. This utterly terrifying character I didn't know until about after this train thing where he's inciting violence. He's fucking terrifying. John Wilson, apparently mates with Guru. Ugh. He lives on a boat too. James Bartolo, quite hilariously, lives in a van. You may have seen him recently pulling bullshit stuff. He's so funny. Just go and move some bricks for a living. Just get a job. Anyway, and also Monica is apparently occupying her van space because maybe her parents
It's very exciting, Joe. It's very exciting.
It's very
funny. Looks
funny.
like she's in a van down by the beach.
Anyway, yeah. Well,
I'm sure a river won't be far away.
A van down by the waterway. But of course, and then there's Canberra crew who don't even have vans. They live in fucking station wagons. It's quite pathetic. Why some of them have vans?
Under plastic wrap.
Yes, exactly. They live in glad wrap. God, that was a sad chapter. Oh, bless their heart.
Kind of pathetic. Yeah.
Tinfoil Tales are doing a wrap up of the year, and I think they'll be mentioning stuff like that. God, it's funny. Anyway, I'm looking forward to that. So let's not forget that also fellow prepper and van dweller Ironbark Thunderbolt from the Canberra days had a sawn-off rifle in his Doomsday truck. Couldn't do much with it. It was like a 22 from 1876. But at the same time, it's a fucking gun and he had bullets. And there is, let's face it, there is nothing more powerful than a man with nothing less to lose. And fuck me, there's a few of them. And they're growing because they're causing shit. And they're going to the fringe. And they're holding a bit of a grudge. They're not happy. Yeah.
They're checked out. And that's the problem. So in terms of how we deal with those people, it's important that police understand and are able to recognise threats. So they need to be able to be brought up to speed with what, let's say, soft sits. I'm sorry, Rob, but we've got to use the term because if we start tossing around alternative nomenclature, then people will just, basically people will become either confused or just turn off.
It's true.
So while we use that thing, and it might be seen as a sort of form of abuse, for the members of that movement. We need to have a generalised term.
I think one thing that we need to do is we need to sort of differentiate between the larger megaphone and the smaller megaphone. We speak to a certain crowd. We don't really tend to have sob-sits or adherents or anyone in that sort of vein listening to us. So this isn't something they kick back on. But in the mainstream media, there is some sense of responsibility insofar as making sure these things don't become they call us sovereign citizens because they don't understand us. What a bunch of morons. So I can see a lot of that, and also the way it does make them sort of double down.
I can see a lot of that too, but the problem with that is if you're writing a column as I have about sovereign citizens or that particular movement, you spend every time you're spending 400 or 500 words talking about here's the history, this is why this is, and at some point we need something a little bit simpler. To be able to, to take the police and say, these are the sorts of triggers you will see. These are the sorts of red flags that you will get in a routine traffic stop or when you enter the premises of a particular individual. When you hear those things, then you need to be able to assess that risk. Yeah. And actually, before you go there, you need to be able to assess that risk. And that means, as we discussed last week, doing basic online searches, searches of police databases where you find out if someone has a shooter's license, where they can be believed to have firearms on the premises. Do a little bit of intel work. We're not talking about deep state surveillance here. We're talking about basic police work in the 22nd 100%. Century.
Totally. Yeah. And look, when it comes down to it, they also doth protest too much a little bit. And I'm very immature. I like to poke them a little bit. So calling them sob-sits, if they get upset, kind of fun.
Yeah, I think that's right too. If it's going to upset them, then it's probably not a big problem for me either too. It tends to basically reduce what is a cult to something that's a little bit silly, a little bit insane. You'd have to be a cracker to even think about it.
Yes, they're a walking contradiction in themselves. The idea of a contradiction in the word sovereign citizen is the beginning of their problems. There's many more. But that being said, Rob, we are listening, and we'll talk about this further. For sure.
Yes, indeed.
We will.
I'm glad we covered that. Anyway, in more recent news, 2 men were charged after they were allegedly caught trying to steal 2 motorbikes from the train's Wieambilla property. And police allege, this was reported a couple of days ago, allege the pair drove out to the Waynes Road property at around 2 a.m. on Sunday, 18th December. That's a week after the ambush. Parked their car nearby and hiked through bushes until they reached the house. They then allegedly tried to take off with 2 motorcycles and were pushing them to their vehicle when they were spotted by police officers performing patrols as part of their crime scene duties. A 23-year-old and 25-year-old men from Tara were arrested and have both been charged with 1 count each of unlawful trespass and stealing by looting. Mm-hmm. The men were charged with a further 2 counts of supplied cannabis in what is described as unrelated to the alleged theft. We've heard some unconfirmed rumours that this may be a case of theft in over an unpaid debt to the 2 men, but that is mere gossip at this stage. Sort of maybe a drug debt, it's been suggested, but that is just gossip at this stage. Yeah. So we'll wait for more on that because these 2 individuals will be before the courts fairly soon, and we'll find out exactly what they're up to.
I just love the fact they did it.
Unless they plead and walk
guilty.
Away.
Probably wise move. Imagine going to a crime scene. I'm assuming with a couple of pounds of weed in your fucking, your Holden fucking Commodore, and being like, oh yeah, all right,
I presume their premises were searched after they were arrested.
Quite possible. Either way,
either vehicle. You're quite right. A vehicle or their premises were searched.
Incredible dead shits. You just have to be
a large amount of cannabis in order to be charged with supply. In Queensland, I think the quantities required for a supply charge are actually very low.
Yeah.
And, it might be, an ounce of weed.
Yeah,
an ounce. And you get done for supply. And in Queensland, it must also be said they've got ridiculous cannabis laws there. They could be sentenced to 20 on the roof.
Despite anyway.
For an ounce of weed. But anyway.
Morons, that's what I'm going to say.
So that was a bit of gossip, but we wanted to put it in there. We find quite informative that the 2 men were arrested for basically breaking into the property for whatever reason.
Shows you who lives there, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thing to do.
Interesting area.
So there's gossip around, but there's always gossip around cooker circles, Joel. Mm-hmm. And we went through the early responses in the cookerverse in last week's episode. Some good, most bad,
Yes.
with a lot of nonsense about false flag attacks. Where are we now?
Oh, fuck me. There's so much bullshit around false flag attacks. That was the immediate first thing because, of course, it's just like a reflex for these morons. And while a shitload of information has come to light in the mainstream media in the past week or so, there was the fact that Nathaniel Train once rammed a border gate in his car, the one from New South Wales to Queensland, because he's unable to cross the border unvaccinated. But I don't think it was even about that, because he was dressed in full camo gear. He was in possession of a cache of firearms with knives and a crossbow, or a bow and arrow at least. I mean...
Yeah, look, the initial reports from Queensland Police and QPS were saying that it was Gareth who actually had the firearms license, and we actually reported that.
Yeah, we did,
we reported that they said that in last week's show, but that appears not to be the case, that Gareth did not have a firearms license.
Yep.
I would think that there'd be quite a few good reasons why he wouldn't be allowed to have one.
Yeah.
But Nathaniel, primary school principal, did have a firearms license, and as you spelled out, Joel, an arsenal of weapons in his car.
Shitload of fucking
The other
guns.
thing that really got me, and I mentioned this in the program last week, was that they had purchased a ghillie suit. You can only get these things online. You can't make them. I mean, and you know, woolies don't stock them.
Maybe get the kids at the arts and crafts, you know?
This is a full camouflage kit. You can look it up. GHILLIE, I think it is, double L, and that's basically full. You look like you're a mound of grass if you're crouching.
Yeah, like a shrub.
And that tells me that this had been planned for a long time.
Yeah, and that's one of those things you only buy as
other
really
issues, but that just sort
very
of confirmed
tactical.
it.
Yeah, it's quite.
But go on, because you know this is really important stuff, Joe.
It is. Look, when his car broke down, there was floods. It was a whole nightmare. He basically realised that there wasn't going to be an altercation at the border, which I believe, just my gut instinct, that's what he was going for. He dumped a bunch of the firearms into the floodwaters and then requested a lift from the local. And later on, those firearms came because the floodwaters subsided. But in the meantime, the incident was reported. The person that he got the lift from, the local he got a lift from, had seen the firearms. He talked to the cops. He reported the border breach. He reported the dumped firearms, and nothing was fucking done about it.
That's just unbelievable.
I know. Like, some fucking cooker rams a border, goes through, dumps a bunch of firearms, and nothing. Anyway, so look, the fact that
I mean, there's an absolute failure of policing there.
That's so bad.
You know,
that is so
that
bad.
gets nipped in the bud. He goes down on very serious firearms charges and one or two other sort of vehicle charges and
it would have been
public order offences. You know,
it's crazy.
We can only speculate,
and we are speculating a lot.
That could have
here.
been nipped in the bud there. I mean,
But like, he's in camo gear with a car full of guns, ramming a border crossing. To me, that was his stand. He was going to say, I don't believe in these border controls. I don't believe in, separating, discriminating against the unvaccinated. And this was going to be a stand, but it didn't happen because the cops didn't show up. But either way, he had guns. And after he got through the border without incident, he dumped them. Someone saw him, reported it, and no one gave a fuck. And I would just say as a side note, Gareth's getting all this spotlight as the aggro one. You know, reports of him fucking disemboweling boars near the school and all this sort of really cooked shit, being a domestic violence abuser, all that sort of stuff. He's not a fucking good guy. But then Nathaniel's this angel who, took a wrong
somehow
turn.
strayed, yeah. And look, that might be true. That
might
might
be
be true, that he got pilled in the space of, a couple of months. But yeah, he's been painted as sort of, Gareth is the one pulling the strings.
He's like this angel, but like this is a Rambo moment.
Well, I mean, look, Rambo's the hero. I mean, is this what Nathaniel thought he was doing? I guess.
Well, that's the thing. So in my head, basically, he thinks of himself as Rambo. He is definitely not the hero of the situation, but he sees himself as a Rambo. Anyway, great film.
Yeah, look, we have discussed at length the kind of violent rhetoric that leads someone to feel a level of self-righteous fury that could underpin an incident like we saw at the train residence. But the way that these people will try and spin the story to avoid any kind of culpability, any sort of responsibility, borders on the macabre.
It's fucking embarrassing. And look, I'd just say that, like, I checked Telegram in the immediate aftermath of the events, and there are a few posts, including one from O'Neig's, that were mourning the death of the police, treating it like a tragic event, which it sort of, like it was. There was none of this false flag bullshit, none of these paranoid delusions and made-up stories. It was just a sad waste of human life that everyone, some of these guys are kind of thin blue line types. But Then they found out they were conspiracy theorists and these pseudo-law adherent types, and suddenly the spin started. Immediately they started making up these fanciful ideas. You know, you saw this when January 6th happened. They blamed it on anti-fascists. It's the same sort of bullshit.
Yeah, look, and if we think about the timing and the chronology of events, so by midnight on Monday, on the 6th of December, the technical response group had been in. The trains had been wiped out, and that was the nature of the reporting. The siege is over. The 3 gunmen, two men and a woman, had been shot dead by police. And it was only as that unfolded over the next 12 hours or so that there was proper reporting of what these guys were about.
Yeah, people looked into it.
That's when they responded. That's when the cookers. Well, a lot of the cookers. Some actually have behaved responsibly.
Yes.
But a lot of the cookers just started with their false flag bullshit. You know, it was predictable.
Yeah, totally. It took him a little while, but yeah.
Yeah, we first saw O'Neig's wriggling like a worm as the spotlight was put on him in his comments section. We mentioned a post from one of the users last week suggesting that they take up arms like their brother Nate, and it made a few headlines, which Dave then suggested was, of course, written by some kind of infiltrator.
Such bullshit.
He tried to delete his Telegram group and failed to do so because he's an idiot, and is now suggesting that people join his website for a fee.
Yes.
Always the grift. To discuss things openly without fear of authorities on there. Well, Dave, you might find a few subpoenas landing in your letterbox if you get this up and going. Better get a lawyer, son. Better get a real good one.
Yeah, I mean, fuck this. He has no idea what he's getting into. But yeah, look, I've had some really good messages from some listeners and like just about this and other things around it. One of them was very interesting because, as many of you will be well aware, Gareth and Stacey Train had a YouTube and a Rumble account where they posted videos. It's sort of everywhere now. Like we said before, I wouldn't really bother with them. A few of them have been posted on social media despite pleas from police not to publish them. We had media outlets like news.com.au and the Daily Mail that posted the videos but then pulled them after requests from police to do so.
Yeah, look, I guess that's what Peter Dutton was talking about with his comments. Like I said, he was spot on until he veered into this social media is the enemy.
Yeah.
Look, by the way, too, Joe, I just wanted to thank, obviously, our listeners for flicking me a lot of stuff.
It's been great.
Twitter DMs, and people have been, you know, I mean, we've been speaking to police officers, we've been speaking to people from all walks of life, and there's a genuine sense of shock and dismay about all of this.
Yeah. It's some really interesting stuff's come to light. And we've sort of anonymized everything in this episode, but at the same time, if you want some credit, man, we'll give you thanks because it's great. Basically, one of the videos in this regards the story of baby Will, which you covered last week with Sandy and Soz, and where the police came into the room. We didn't play the clip or anything, but there was conveniently a cameraman in there. They took the baby for surgery under a court order, and this potentially involved vaccinated blood transfusions. That's the crux of the story because they believe that's going to kill the kid.
It's an incredible story. Or the response from the parents is just unbelievable. And
they're just
then
peeled
more broadly
as fuck.
New Zealand, you know.
Oh, it's an outrageous story. And it's worth looking into. But like it's basically believed that the implication that the parents, well, the implication in the videos is the parents were cowards for letting the baby be taken by police and then taken into custody for the surgery. The surgery was successful, and apparently the baby's recovering well. Like, there's no reason to be worried. But, of course, it's all made up bullshit. This is what the podcast is often about. Made up bullshit by idiots. And while the online presence of the trains didn't have the usual sort of save the children bullshit, this may have been a contributing factor to their extreme reaction to police and this general hatred for authority, because this sense of tyranny, which is reinforced heavily by these online forums and these talking heads in the movement, it is such a huge part of the reasoning they seem to give for their response to police, why this incident happened in the first place.
Yeah, I'd say given the timeline, you know, ordering the ghillie suit, you know, that's a month in the mail.
Yeah, true.
Those sorts of things. But yes, you're right. I think that there are certain issues that will amplify.
Yes.
That will amplify their responses. And I think the baby Will story, which Sandy and Sos have covered in, ask listeners to turn to it and have a listen.
Yeah, it's our last episode.
May well have been just another trigger along the line of quite a few.
Yeah, and like, look, whether Baby Will's story was a part of the radicalization or not, it shows that there are so many things in the conspiracy universe, because there's like a million Baby Wills out there. It's just whether you're watching or not, because there's so many stories they've made up with adverse reactions and all that sort of stuff. These things are designed to make people incredibly angry, because anger clicks, anger watches, anger buys. And it does. It gets them angry, and then they get completely pilled, because this anger leads them to this chasing the rabbit hole. And then what happens next? Who knows what happens next? And there is another aspect of this which I think is a geographic one, because the area the trains lived in, otherwise known as the blocks, apparently, has been of interest to gas companies for fracking, so coal seam gas fracking. And the blocks of land in the area are apparently quite small. There are a few acres, and it makes them sort of unsuitable for any kind of agriculture. You can't have sheep and cows, and you can't grow crops. You can just sort of self-sustain a bit.
Well, you can, but you're not going to be able to do it at any sort of economic level. Yeah,
it's pretty pissy. So the main thing
you can eat the dirt.
Grow, yes, exactly. But the main thing that people grow there apparently is weed. So it's an area that's known for drug-related activity. And just, growing a bit of weed to make money on the side. And that's sort of, the guys nicking the motorbike got caught.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right. I'm sure that's right. But this is the sort of stuff you get on the fringes of any of our cities and major regional centres, It's just, it's kind of normal.
Yeah,
really.
Totally. Yeah. It's not specific to this place. But it just gives you an idea of the vibe of the area.
Yeah.
Because this may explain why they sent 4 cops on the day. I mean, this area isn't exactly known for its upstanding citizenry. I mean, like, a couple of locals decided it was a smart idea to nick those motorbikes from a fucking homicide crime scene. I mean, you can't assume that you're walking into a fucking Mensa meeting if you're going to be walking into an area that has that kind of people in it. I mean, fuck me.
Look, from around 2011, gas companies have been prospecting in the area, fracking, which has been an issue of contention with the locals. Shut the gate. Eat the dirt.
Yeah, lock the gate. Yep.
It's Jonesy Alan Jones actually marching with the Greens in this particular part of the world.
Yeah.
Sweating up a storm, sweating like Simeon Boikov in a sauna.
Sweating like Alan Jones in a toilet. I mean, sorry.
It was kind of a wet T-shirt competition, but not a good one.
No, not a good one, no.
Because Jonesy was really sweating there, and we did see a bit of nipple work. Anyway, look, there are reports that gas company staff have had guns pulled on them by locals in this particular part of the world. And this has led to a conspiracy theory with absolutely no basis whatsoever. Knock it over, Joel, please.
Well, look, I'm not going to go into huge detail of the theory, but it's been from around 2011 that the gas companies have been sort of prospecting in the area. And, that's when all this sort of problem's been sort of struck up. The theory itself is incredibly silly, and if you read it, it goes into these like really hilarious reaches where all these people are related. There's Rothschilds in there, Tom Tanuki's mentioned. It's fucking stupid. But it's really dumb. Like, I've said it to you.
I can't imagine the Rothschilds and Tom Tanuki in the same sentence, but there you go.
It's really funny for all the wrong reasons. But it generally outlines the idea that gas companies in the area have been acting in an intimidating manner and causing grief with these said blockies. I mean, I don't doubt that at all. But a fairly important detail here, which the original poster of this thread didn't really look into apparently because it's not one of the reaches they made, is the Trains bought their property 7 years ago. These coal seam gas wells were installed in 2011 and 2012.
Wait a minute.
Few years off here, mate. Yeah.
Okay.
So, the Trains were either fully aware of the coal seam gas situation, didn't do their research, or generally speaking, all of this is bullshit and baseless.
Yeah,
but still,
because the Trains, I'm betting Gareth. I bet he did a lot of his own research.
I bet he did a lot of his own fucking research. But DuckDuckGo is apparently doesn't have that on there. Very sad. But still, the theory has found roots on Facebook and Telegram. And this is meant to explain why they shot cops and their neighbour in the back. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like, there's no
makes no sense.
There's no basis for the theory. Fine, but even if this was exactly the motivation behind the fucking incident, how does this justify killing cops that turn up to your gate? The fuck? You think they're coming to take your house and put gas wells in there? That doesn't justify killing people. No, still naughty. So there's no mention of gas companies or fracking in the social media history of the group, including, Gareth, Stacey, or Nathaniel. No mention of gas companies in the videos uploaded to YouTube and Rumble. And why is that? See, they haven't stopped to fucking think about that. And I think they probably have. The issue is that it gets in the way of their false narrative and they need a fucking story. Because the reality of the situation is that these people were indoctrinated with extremist ideology from the same places they like to hang out and casually discuss hanging politicians, and this is something they should be forced to accept, but they simply can't do it. They just fucking won't do it. And then, of course, you've got this development today, which is the Queensland Police Service is suggesting they might buy the property to avoid it being bought by conspiracy theorists.
I believe that will go ahead.
It may. It's a conversation. And it's trying to avoid this co-opting of this place as some sort of weird, shrine to these assholes. And it should be a memorial for the police and the slain neighbour. But of course, this is being seen as a move to buy the property on behalf of the gas companies. And it's a huge booster to this dumb fracking theory. It's just an absolute fertiliser.
I've seen some other weird rationalisations too, that this is a way of sort of covering up.
Well, that was apparently the grass fire was burning evidence.
Yeah, that's right. The grass
Fucking
fire was
morons.
Deliberately lit by the police and
Shut the fuck up.
burn evidence and all this sort of stuff.
No basis.
It's just bizarre. And there's also a push for a national gun register in the face of the incident to ensure that police are aware of guns that may cross borders. Kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
This is hyping up the Port Arthur-style theories that it was a false flag to tighten gun laws.
Anything you do in response to this incident is going to be a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Just anything.
Just to let our listeners know, if you seek a firearms licence, it is a state matter.
It is, yeah.
You can go through a process. It will be looked at by the licensing squad in your local area, and they'll do basic background checks on you to see if you've got one. If you're living in a unit in Chippendale and you want to buy a 30-30 rifle, they're probably going to go, yeah, it's probably a little bit too much gun for you, champion.
Yes, I'm going to store mine at the range.
Yeah, look, that all of those things can happen. Generally speaking, if you want a high-powered rifle licence, you need to have bloody good reason to have one.
Yeah, which is really annoying because I want one. Anyway, I'll store it at the range. I will.
Damn you, New World Order.
I really like shooting. But yeah, so basically there's a push for this natural gun register, and I think it makes a lot of sense. People were surprised that it wasn't there in the first place. But another thing that's happened here is this relationship with a man named Don. And this has been a really interesting element for me as someone who's sort of watching this sort of these fringe relationships, because they named this guy in the final video they uploaded after they murdered the two police officers. They said at the end of the clip, "We'll see you when we get home, Don."
So and your wife and Don's lovely wife. Yeah.
I mean, it's just got so many religious overtones. And this guy, I'm not going to name his online name. Fuck him. But he's a conspiracy theorist who clearly has very violent tendencies. And he responded in a video after this saying that the devils came for them to kill them, and they had to kill the devils themselves and are now on the run, which they're not on the run.
He's straight out prepper. He's dangerous. There's death cult written all over this guy.
Oh, totally. This guy is not in any way, shape or form okay. He then said, "It's no different for us. The devils come for us. They fucking die. It's just that simple."
That sounds like a real problem.
It's not good. I mean, they shared interests, right? Fundamentalist Christianity, well, the bits they like, the really scary ones, the bit that hates gays, hatred of authorities, and this deep involvement in the conspiracy theory universe. And it looks on the face that this Don guy was encouraging this to happen and quite proud that it did. And that's really fucked up. I feel like he has a lot to answer for in this situation.
There are jurisdictional issues, of course, because he's in the States. But, yeah.
He can just tell cops to fuck off and they can't do anything about it.
I can foresee. I mean, look, just going to arrest the guy is going to be a problem.
Yeah. No, there wouldn't be. I don't think he's going to be touched by the
what would he be?
locals.
What would he be charged with? Incitement to commit a
can you even
terrorist
do
act.
that
I mean,
across
all
borders?
these things can be triggered. There's no doubt about that.
I don't know if it works across borders, man.
Yeah. Look, I mean, there's good reason to believe that the train trio called in the welfare check themselves to set up the ambush and kill the officers. That's the information we're getting. The Australia's been doing some excellent reporting in terms of QPS response and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we found from that same reporting was telling us that the property was sort of heavily prepared for. It was almost like they created a pathway that, there were obstacles blocking people, so they just sort of go a certain way where they could be ambushed. That seems to be the case at the moment. We will know a lot more about this, and we hope and pray that there is a proper and public coronial inquest that needs to take place, and that people aren't provided anonymity and all this sort of stuff in order for them to give evidence.
And that police learn from this. Police learn something from this, and they pay Rob to teach them.
So, we're going to find out a lot more about this. There is a lot of very good media reporting at the moment. There's also some very good citizen journalism going on. But one thing for sure is that we've just been made brutally aware that we've got a very serious problem in this country.
Fuck yeah, absolutely.
And in other news today, as we record this on the 20th of December 2022, in a submission to Parliament's long COVID inquiry, the former Australian Medical Association president and former MP for Wentworth, Kieran Phelps, has spoken of a devastating experience emerging as the most prominent public health figure in the country to speak up about the taboo subject.
Yeah.
And this is according to news.com.au today. Former federal MP Dr. Kieran Phelps has revealed she and her wife both suffered serious and ongoing injuries from COVID vaccines, while suggesting the true rate of adverse events is far higher than acknowledged due to underreporting and, according to her own words, threats from medical regulators. Take it away, Joel. This is from her submission to the Parliament.
Yeah, I saw this in a PDF form. I wanted to check it out in the original document, and yeah, it's all there and then some.
Mm-hmm.
This is an issue that I have witnessed firsthand with my wife, who suffered a severe neurological reaction to her first Pfizer vaccine within minutes, including burning face and gums, paresthesia.
Paresthesia.
Yeah, thank you. You made me read that. You suck for doing that to me.
Sorry. Should have given you a heads up.
And numb hands and feet. That's okay. My head was up my ass. While under observation by myself, another doctor, and a registered nurse at the time of immunisation. This is what she said. So, obviously she's making sure that people know she's taking this seriously. She's not just doing it anecdotally.
Yes.
I continue to observe the devastating effect a year and a half later with the addition of fatigue and additional neurological symptoms, including nerve pains, altered sense of smell, visual disturbance, and musculoskeletal inflammation. The diagnosis and causation has been confirmed by several specialists who have told me they have seen a lot of patients in a similar situation.
So the first thing to say about this is Dr. Phelps is not reaching for the bullhorn. She's not seeking attention. She made a submission to a parliamentary inquiry, and she did so some time ago. But as it's a submission, it's a public document, and the media, someone in the media, somewhere or other, have gone through the APH website and pulled this out because it's a public document.
Exactly, yeah, they found it.
And the second thing to say is don't shoot the messenger. Right? I've seen a lot of stuff online, particularly on Twitter, sort of doing just that. And we don't want to do that. And we have to accept, that she has no reason to lie. She wrote anecdotally of anecdotal discussions with other doctors of adverse reactions running at 1 per 1,000. And she notes that that's kind of speculation, but that on the available data is way too low a ratio. But as we've always said in the conditional release program, more data is good. And that's what she's saying. She said, look, and we've had mild adverse reactions to the vaccines. You had one, Joe. I know I had one. My first vaccine, I felt as crook as Rookwood the next day, but only for a day.
Yeah.
And you had similar sort of mild adverse reactions to the vaccine.
The fourth one kicked my ass.
Yeah, the fourth one appears to be kicking a few asses around the place.
So shit.
And so, those are problems. And so if we want to load all that in, that indicates the problems with reporting. So you and I copped this mild adverse reaction and we didn't report it.
Well, I have actually reported adverse reactions because they used to do when you did it at the government mandated places, they would send you a survey, and I used to say, yes, I have had an adverse reaction. I had headache, fatigue, and things like that.
If I got something like that, I ignored it. And that's probably not right. But but there obviously are issues with reporting. So we'll probably never get to the full extent of it.
Definitely not.
But one thing we do know, there have been deaths. I think 14 in Australia is the right figure. And it's a terrible figure, right? And I hope the families of those who died as a result of receiving the vaccine are well compensated. Something that's impossible to know given the opaque nature of the compensation scheme.
Yeah.
These people should be loaded up with a lot of money. I mean,
absolutely.
It won't help their grief, but it'll allow them to move on. And
always maintain that people who have either adverse reactions that impact their lives or are associated with a death should have money thrown at them.
Yeah.
Totally.
Anyway, like you, I read the submission. I read Karen Phelps' submission in full. And what she's really seeking is transparency. And that's what we need.
Yeah.
That's really what she's talking about here. And there is a very important public disclosure element with the COVID vaccination program.
Yeah.
And we need to have all that information before us, before our eyes, in public records. And the TGA, Commonwealth, state and federal health departments need to be providing that to us.
Totally.
And they need to be transparent, not just because we need to make informed decisions, but also if you deny truth, if you hide it away, if you hide hard facts away and important data, and make it as hard as possible for us to know them, you also leave yourself open to cooker manipulation and disinformation.
Well, in that situation, they're right. If there is a conspiracy to cover up the truth about adverse reactions, well, it's not cooker at that point.
I wouldn't describe it as a conspiracy. I would describe it as an institutional failure
or an institutional cover-up.
No, I'm not saying it's a cover-up. I'm saying that there's not enough. Firstly, there's not enough weight being given to studies. So the studies that we have aren't really broad enough to draw any great conclusions.
Yeah.
We've already talked about the holes in the data about people who have received the vaccines and the third and fourth boosters, or the second and third, first and second boosters. So there's basically problems, but then there should be sort of surveying. There should be greater knowledge around all of this,
which of course can happen if you incentivize it. If the email that came with the survey had $10 attached to it, then maybe you would have filled it out.
I'd do more than that for $10, mate.
But I'll tell you what, one thing about the reporting on this is the reporting in news.com.au, which I actually found out about today looking up fucking Pete. But this guy, Frank Chung, he's done heaps of news reporting on basically anti-vax stuff. He's pretty fucking pilled. And while the article on Phelps is completely reasonable and he really did do a pretty basic up and down journalism job, he also quotes a guy named Tie Dye, who is a DJ, musician, millennial or Zoomer bullshit, whatever. And this fucking guy, he does promoted Facebook posts. That's why I know he exists, with this peeled bullshit about how APRA is trying to cover up his medical records, and the APRA is actually formed by the WEF because they have an ABN and they can be bought like a company. This guy's a fucking idiot. This Frank Chung guy quotes him.
Yeah.
Quotes him in the fucking article and has another article based on all this anecdotal shit he comes up with. This guy is a fucking cooked unit, and this journalist is more than happy to take his word for it because, well, he seems like the anti-vax guy at news now. So, yeah, I think the Phelps aspect of it is valid, but
it's perfectly valid. It's perfectly valid.
But this fuckhead is also quoting people who are making shit up because they're pilled. How can you differentiate?
Those are two separate notions.
It's so hard to differentiate. If Phelps has a very high esteem, and that's why we can take her word for it. But you have this guy with a straight face
had no reason
reporting
to
on
lie.
a cooker, and then you put it next to someone like Phelps. Why are they in the same article? You fucking hack. Just don't put Phelps in an article with Tie-Dye the cooker.
Yeah. Statistically, it's possible. I mean, and would say statistically, it's possible that the couple, her and her partner, have both suffered adverse reactions. Now, the ones that she talked about suffering herself, you would put in the minor category.
That's crazy because they're not the two same things. But the wife and the thing, you're right. It is a bit like lightning striking twice in the same place. And that was one of the first things I thought, like, how can you and your wife both have an adverse reaction? But yeah, look, crazier things have happened. Like it's not out of the ordinary. But yeah, it just really pissed me off. The point is,
let's have the data.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's have it as decent set of data as we possibly can.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and if there were fuck ups,
it is really important to counteract disinformation
and finding the balance between the two. And
hiding it away, or being an opaque organisation like the TGA is just not going to work.
Fair.
In this current environment, be honest, be transparent, be accountable. And a reminder to all our patrons that we'll be discussing some huge cooker stories in our Overflow episode later this week, but only if you've ponied up for the content. Right. And in this week's ep, Monica's living in a van down by the river. And a self-set fuck-knuckle Wayne Glue, who, when he's not living in a van down by the river, has been issuing arrest warrants for WA
and magistrates, apparently. That's great.
And magistrates too.
It's very funny.
That'll work. That's going to play out. what could possibly
We'll
go
be
wrong
looking
there?
further into that. We got that tip today.
And in deeply pleasing news, and to the surprise of no one, Nazi boy Tom Sewell has been convicted of assaulting a security guard at Channel 9's Melbourne
Yep,
HQ.
fuck him.
He's on bail awaiting sentencing, so have a Merry Christmas, shit stain, but Easter's bound not to be quite as
Eat the
nice.
ham now, fuckstick.
So, listeners, become a Patreon now, or a patron indeed now, and you'll have this stuff sitting in your stocking for Christmas when baby Jesus was born and a paleo diet was gnawing on a sheep when the shepherds weren't.
It's a shame we gave baby Jesus so much liver in the baby yum yum, and now baby Jesus is dead.
The baby Jesus has been on the bone.
Been on the bone
Been on the
broth.
bone soup. Oh,
And
dear.
now is dead.
And that leads us to...
It has been a huge week in Pete Evans, with the disgraced former celebrity pizza cook getting to a whopping 111 followers on Twitter.
He's made it. He's
Oh,
made
man,
it.
he's still got it, man. He's got that star power. You know, that irresistible draw. People just want to know what he's up to. They just want to know what he's saying. Well, I mean, 111 people do. That's that, yeah.
Yeah.
He hasn't actually tweeted since his first one, which was met with general derision from people who quite rightly think he's a bit of a flog. You know, it was a Nazi meme. It was bad. He got all excited about Elon Musk taking over Twitter, you know, so he joined up. You know, he thought, oh, fuck yeah, this is my time. This is my moment. He retweeted one of Musk's missives that just said, the bird is free. But just because the bird is free doesn't mean anyone gives a shit about you. I'm sorry, man. Disgraced. What part of disgrace do you not understand? But he's still going strong on Telegram. And by going strong, I mean sharing the usual bullshit, Tucker Carlson.
Yes.
And so much Elon Musk simping these days. Man, the platform doesn't even like you. Like, why are you bothering? But today's Pete had something important to talk about. And this, of course, was the submission about long COVID from Dr. Karen Phelps, who has revealed that she and her wife both had the long-standing adverse reactions to the Pfizer jab. We just discussed this, but I tell you what, her claims are going to be absolute catnip to anti-vaxxers. While we completely respect her position on this, man, they are going to go fucking nuts. But Pete just can't take a win.
Pete would have.
Take a win, Pete.
Pete would... Pete would have been all over
Just be
this.
happy.
Oh, come on,
So
Pete.
Pete said in a fucking Telegram post this.
The doctor above has publicly said on television and in print media that the paleo diet and I were dangerous. Dangerous, Pete. Present tense.
Not with 111 Twitter
What an
followers.
interesting journey. What is that? No, what is that? Index fingers up?
Yeah,
What is
he's
that?
a fucking idiot.
What an interesting journey. Wonderful to see that the doctor is now calling out the very dangerous shots. I wonder if they will look into anti-inflammatory diets and natural therapies in their journey for health. Love, love, love.
Yeah, that's heaps of love. No, it's called a grudge, Paleo Pete. It's a grudge. You're angry. You're angry. You need to calm down. You know, drink some kava. In 2015, he apparently claimed that his paleo diet could cure serious health conditions, including asthma, dementia, and cancer, just casually. Bizarrely enough,
You did that, Pete.
Karen Phelps disagreed and said that the paleo diet had not been shown to shrink tumours, lead to cancer remission, stop asthma, or stop dementia.
And she's a medical
Yes.
doctor, right? And Pete?
No, Pete's an idiot.
No.
So she said this, I think the claims are at best optimistic and at worst fraudulent, which, yes, ouch, but
Got that F word in there.
let it go, Peter. Let it go, Peter Darrell. Just let it go. So he couldn't quite let it sit, and he came back with this alongside a video of Phelps on Q&A advocating for masks. This was 90 minutes later, so he's just bubbling away.
I wonder, he says, if the doctor from the above post had read the hundreds of studies that say masks don't work, but in fact make you sicker. Where's that?
Yeah.
Pete? There is not one peer-reviewed study that says masks work at all. Oh, there are lots,
Yes,
Pete.
there are.
How many experts, in inverted commas, have spoken complete lies over the last few years, or are they just lazy? And there's a space between lazy and a question mark. And then, because he's an idiot, and then the index finger again. Three of
it's because
those.
there's a video above, you know, that he's pointing to content.
I
Yeah,
see.
that's text, not a screenshot.
He's
But
pointing.
look, it appears that Pete has a bee in his
very rude.
bonnet. And it goes without saying there are several peer-reviewed studies, as you said, suggest that masks do work by preventing the spread of SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah.
But
Lots
just
of
say shit. Don't worry about it, Pete. No one expects you to tell the truth anymore. You've got your own truth. You just tell us that, and we'll just pat you on the head and tell you it's going to be okay. Of course, he posted some more bullshit, including some memes about the efficacy of masks, but then he just couldn't fucking help himself. He had to keep going. So he posted a screenshot of one of Phelps' tweets, and she said this.
I have a few things to say about the start of the new, in hashtag for some reason, school year. Return to primary school classrooms should be delayed until vaccination levels are optimal, mitigation measures are completed, and the peak of this wave of the COVID-19 passes.
Yeah.
Because that came from Karen.
And
right?
Pete didn't like this. He responded with this.
No, yeah, he's going to hate that. Imagine promoting a dangerous poison to the public and then being injured by the same dangerous poison with a capital P for some reason you told others to inject into themselves and their children. Look above. Look above.
Exactly.
Look above.
Yeah. And like...
It's very rude, all that pointing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and just imagine what a finger pointer he would
mother
be.
Ever tell you it's rude to point?
He's a bit like that. So look, this should be a great moment for Pete and anti-vaxxers to like. You know what it's like? The moment someone does this, they just like, yes! Phelps is not only a respected member of the medical fraternity, once president of the AMA, but also a total darling of that sort of centre-left group, you know, your intellectual class. They, you know, we respect her, right? So the revelation of a vaccine injury in the parliamentary submission has already found its way to the desk of Frank Chung, who I mentioned before, who has been mixing her story with actual anti-vaxxers and fuckhead cookers like that tie-dye moron who's pushing the idea that WHO has bought APRA. Idiot. And of course, this is just going to mean that every fucking ailment from here onward is going to be from the vaccine. And if you weren't vaccinated, it's because you were shed on. So I'm not looking forward to that. But you're right. We do need to look further into this, and we do need to have an open heart to it, because these things do exist, and we do get a little bit all or nothing about it. So let's just roll with these punches. But the thing is, Pete can't take the win. He's holding that grudge and he can't let it go. And while people like Meryl Dory will be smiling from ear to ear today, Pete just simmers away in his little angry boy booster chair, trying to find ways to get at his arch nemesis from a rivalry that started and probably ended about 7 years ago.
She would barely remember who
not
he is.
think about it at night. But that's our Pete, you know? If he was a graceful, decent human being, this segment would suck. It wouldn't exist.
No.
But thankfully, he's a malignant narcissist that constantly gives us reasons to mock him.
Thanks,
It's
Pete.
great. Bless you, Pete. I mean, I was really worried. Zippy Babbitt almost took your spot. Genuinely thought that you were done. We made the intro music for him and everything, but it's good to have you back, mate. It's good to have you back.
Mate, it's great. He's back. He's
Bless.
back. And you have been listening to the Conditional Release program with your hosts, Jack the Insider and Joel Hill.
Jack can be found on Twitter on @JackTheInsider and Joel on @CrunchMoses with a K. Set up a Facebook page. You can find it fairly easily. And if you enjoyed the episode, please share it on social media.
We have a Patreon, and I have mentioned this 3 or 4 times.
Yes,
not in an effort to strong-arm you.
We have laboured the point. It's been good.
But we do have a Patreon to keep this sustainable. It's a labour of love, but we still have to pay the rent, of course.
Yeah, exactly. We do have expenses, and God, it would really help if I could work less. But for as little as $5 a month, you get all sorts of bonus content. It's really good. It's great. It's totally worth it. We try and make it worth it.
And finally, all feedback, tips and death threats should be sent to theconditionalreleaseprogram@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, even if you're seeking asylum at my place, because the cops are looking for you. Da, would you like some borscht?
Yeah. Das Verdanya.
And a baby wipe.
Yeah. Oh, his bum's gone back into my head. Thanks, listeners. I'm going to end on that note.
Please, Simeon, please use the baby wipes.
Oh. Here's some hand sanitizer.
Merry Christmas, listeners.
Merry Christmas, guys. See ya.
I don't think I ever want to talk to any of those people.
Fuck me, you guys are bastards!